Hi, my name is Whitney Gabor, and today I'm here to talk to you about raising EPAS reading comprehension scores to hit your school's target. And from my understanding, one of the goals at this school is to increase our EPAS reading comprehension score. So today, my goal is to provide you with some background knowledge regarding the strategies and the theories that go into being a comprehensive reader. So, reading comprehension. It's the thing that we're all supposed to be teaching, but the question is, do we really even understand it ourselves as educators? According to Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, reading comprehension is the capacity of the mind to perceive and understand. Reading comprehension, then, would be the capacity to perceive and understand the meanings communicated by texts. I'm sure in your experience as educators, you can think back to different students and maybe different classes or years that came in with a different skill set, and maybe some of them were better readers, some of them were more struggling readers, but our goal today is to kind of look at all different abilities of students and find a way to pretty much level the playing field and bring up those students that maybe have some more deficits and give them strategies to conquer their struggles. So, what does it mean to be a reading comprehension teacher at the secondary level? There are many skills that we actively teach, whether or not we actually notice this. One of which is activating prior knowledge. So, asking our students to think about what they already know, refer to their background knowledge or their schema, and apply that. Set purposes for our reading. Predict when we receive new texts. Decode text, specifically vocabulary and context. Summarize, visualize, question, monitor our understanding, and reflect and apply. Now, those are skills that we actively teach, hopefully on a day-to-day basis, but there are several other things that oftentimes go unnoticed as a teacher that we are also doing. Hopefully, we are identifying the needs of our students. What deficits do they have? Are we able to target those individual students who maybe need a little bit of extra help? We are supposed to be providing the opportunity for kids to apply these skills, hopefully, in an ideal world, inside and outside of the classroom. We are making the skills applicable and beneficial to the students so that they can see why this is worth learning and hopefully be able to apply it in the future. And then as educators, we should be providing strong feedback that the students can use to better themselves. So I'm going to be taking you through a couple of the different theories that all add up to the idea of reading comprehension and the acquisition of reading comprehension. So I'm going to talk to you about several different phases that we as humans and our students go through. First of which is the pre-reading phase. Now this is prior to age 6, and at this time the child gains awareness of print and sounds while gradually learning to make associations between the two. So at some point, as we increase in maturity and our skill set, we begin to notice that there is a connection between things that we see printed in text or on paper and the sounds that create those words. Next is the alphabetic phase. This is kindergarten to second grade, in which decoding single words and simple stories begins to happen. Now, I know I can only speak from my experience, but if I think back to something like first grade, I remember taking home baggie books, which were really simple picture books. They had very simple words, but building that confidence and being able to read those words aloud to myself, to my teacher, and to others who listen. Next is the orthographic phase, which is roughly third and fourth grade, during which the child is able to analyze unknown words using orthographic patterns and contextual references. So hopefully what you're beginning to see here is that these skills continue to build, and we are not done yet. So I'm going to give you a little snapshot here of current student data at SHS. So if you take a look at this, this is just to build an idea of the population that we are working with. The beige light yellow color is white, which is 66.9% of our student population. The red is Hispanic, which is 13.1% and ever growing. The blue is the Native American population, which is 0.2, which you can't even really see in the image here. Black students make up 5.2% of the school. Asian, 11.9%, and we have 2.6% multiracial students. So what I would like you to understand from this is that we are trying to meet students of all different needs and all different backgrounds and all different skill sets. So I'm hoping that the things that I teach you today, you can take back and apply in your classroom and maybe differentiate based on what you recognize the students need. So what you see here is a large chart, and what it does is it compares all of the data from 2010-2011 EPASS test scores. It looks at the district as a whole and then also breaks down each school into their own component. So for our sake, we're going to be looking at Schaumburg, which is the second to the right, second to the last, on the right. And if you'll notice, it's broken down into reading and math underneath the title of Schaumburg. We will just be focusing on reading for the purpose of today. And then underneath that, you'll notice years 2010 and 2011 will be the data that we are specifically looking at. So the first horizontal level in white underneath the years, you can see there are two different columns. In 2010, there was 61.7 written there, and in 2011, a 61.4. Now, these numbers are the percents meeting or exceeding the standards in a specific area. So for this purpose, reading. So if you notice, 2011 is in red, the 61.4. That means the 61.4% was the percentage meeting or exceeding standards decreased, and the group did not make AYP. So as you can see from 2010 to 2011, there's a negative 0.3% change there. So we decreased. The row underneath that represents the scores of white students. In 2010, that was a 66.5%, and in 2011, you'll notice it was 61.8. So again, our numbers seem to be going down, and it is also red, meaning that the percentage meeting or exceeding standards decreased, and again, did not meet AYP. Hispanic students in 2010 were at 33.9%, and in 2011 we're at 53.4%. So you can notice that that is a very large change. The yellow suggests percentage meeting or exceeding standards increased. The group did not make AYP. So that is a huge jump of students increasing. Again, not meeting AYP, which is not ideal. The next category is Asian and Pacific Islander. In 2010, they were at 68%, and in 2011, they were at 75.4%. Again, the yellow meaning the percentage meeting.
Curtis Goodwin, please call 4771. Curtis Goodwin, please call 4771.
In 2010, that was 68%, and in 2011 that was 75.4%. Like I was saying, that is also in the yellow, meaning the percentage meeting or exceeding standards increased, and the group did not meet AYP. So we're getting a little bit better here. We're having more students getting closer to meeting that target that we've set, but again, still not enough to make AYP. Underneath that is the students with disabilities. You'll see in 2010 it says 30.2%, and in 2011 30.2%, so no changes there. And then finally, the last horizontal level is economically disadvantaged. 2010 was 43.3%, 2011 was 47.5%. Again, the yellow percentage meeting or exceeding standards increase. The group still, though, did not meet AYP. So this next screen breaks down the scores specifically for SHS even more. What you see across the top horizontal level where it says reading, we have the total number of students. For all SHS students, that's going to be 559. The EXPRD average is the Explore Reading Average score. The next column to the right is the Explore Reading to Plan. So how many points did they grow in their reading? The next column is Plan Reading Average score. Then Plan Reading to ACT. How many points did they on average increase? Then the average ACT reading score. And then finally, it looks at the Explore Reading to the ACT reading to see their growth in points overall. So as you can see, for all SHS students, like I mentioned, 559 students we were looking at, the average Explore Reading score was 15.3. They made on average 2.7 points of growth, so that by the time they took the plan as sophomores, the average score was an 18. Then from sophomore to junior year, there was an average of 3.1 points of growth, leaving the average ACT reading score to be 21.1. And overall, their growth in reading from Explore as freshmen to ACT reading as juniors was 5.8 points. Underneath that, you'll notice that There are subcategories. We have the amount of students on free and reduced lunch, how many students have IEPs, how many black students were part of this group, how many of these students were white, the number Asian, and the number Hispanic. So as you can see, 2.7 points and 3.1 points was the average growth from year to year. It is stated, statistics show that the average student does make around 2 points of growth. So our hope in the future is that we can be seeing more growth between each of these years so that they can reach an ACT reading score with a higher average than 21.1. It is important to know that 21 is the average score to get into Illinois state schools, including Northern, Southern, Eastern, and Western. So our school has set a goal of reaching this 21 for every student. However, that is not to discredit.
Attention, Veronica Garola, please report to the main office. Veronica Garola to the main office. Thank you.
So that is not to say that other students can't potentially reach higher than that, but our goal as a school is going to be to get everyone to a 21 so that they do have those opportunities for education after college. So we are going to talk about some of the theories behind reading comprehension. First of which is the theory of cognitive development created by Piaget. It describes the way in which the quality of children's thinking changes over time. So just like previously when we talked about the different phases that a student goes through, it's kind of the same idea. We tend to grow, and as we mature, we learn more and more. Piaget explains that 4 factors influences a child's cognitive development. They are biological maturation, activity, social experiences, and equilibration. And then he also states that 4 stages of thinking from childhood to adulthood are the sensory motor period, the pre-operational period, the concrete operational period, and formal operational period, all of which we're going to break down right now. So, first is the sensory motor period, which is birth to 2 years. And the thought behind this is that the thought process is based on sensory experiences as the child explores the world. So as a young human, there is much to experience and learn about the world. So this is the time that a child takes things in through their senses. The child does not have sufficient language ability to communicate with words at this point. Next is the pre-operational period, which is 2 to 7 years. During this time, there is rapid language development. There's the ability to organize and categorize understanding of the world with words, and there begins to have concrete thinking. So recognizing that an idea, a word actually can concretely exist. It's something we can touch. It's something that we can hold. Next is the concrete operational period, which is generally 7 to 11 years. It is the use of concrete objects to begin processing abstract concepts. So now that I can identify concrete objects, things that I can touch, I can hold, I am now associating words, which are abstract concepts, with these things. And then finally, formal operation period, which is 11 years old to adult, where language acquisition allows for use in abstract ways, so higher levels of thinking. Another thing that I would like you to know about is the maturation theory. The theorists behind this were Morfett and Washburn. They state that reading instruction should not be implemented until students reach the age of 6.5 years old. So again, just one theory to keep in mind. They suggested that any prior instruction to 6.5 years had the potential to cause damage to the student's reading ability. So just think about the implications of that for a moment. If we did not teach any reading, if we did not expose our students to different texts until the age of 6.5, how different our world might be today. Next is the theory of literacy development. Obviously, we would like to develop our students to be literate individuals. Holdaway was the major theorist associated, and he believed that there was a 3-dimensioned theory. First was the explanation of the developmental nature of literacy learning. Secondly was the explanation of the 4 processes Holdaway viewed as central to literacy learning. And then third, explanation of a method of teaching designed to promote developmental literacy learning. Just a few more theories to build your background knowledge. The emergent literacy theory was coined by Marie Clay, of whom you might have learned already. She believed that children's development in the areas of listening, speaking, reading, and writing are all interrelated. So if we have a deficit in one, that begins to affect other things. Literacy development starts at birth and is continuous and ongoing. And she also believes that children's home environment plays a critical role on the development of literacy abilities. So are the students read to at home on a daily basis? Was it text something they were exposed to? Did they see their parents and their older siblings reading as they were growing up? So that kind of segues right into our family literacy theory. Taylor was the major theorist behind this thought, and the belief is that the way the families, children, and extended family members use literacy at home and then in their community has an effect on how students develop their reading comprehension. So as a teacher, this is one of the things that's difficult because obviously the students' home lives are usually out of our control and how exposed they are to text there, but it can be something to think about. How can you be incorporating parents to create a literacy-rich environment at home so that they can be supporting the work you are doing in the classroom? So now we're going to talk about some perspectives on cognitive processing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our student data versus our theories. And I think one thing that's important to know, and you might have learned this in your undergrad, is the idea of classical conditioning. So for us, that means that students' positive and negative emotional states become connected to stimuli, such as things like books, tests, teachers, and the classroom. And I specifically highlighted the word test here because that's what we are going to be talking about. So oftentimes students begin to have anxiety when they hear a word like test, or you need your book, or they hear something about school. And so our goal as educators is to foster an environment where we just ask students to make growth so that they are not intimidated by these different things. So our hope is that if we are able to make the students more comfortable and more confident in their skills, they will have more positive emotional states connected to ideas such as tests rather than the negative. So this means for teachers that we need to stress improvement rather than perfection. Any growth is good growth. So in order to reach higher levels of student performance, there are three big categories that I think all kind of feed into this idea. One is the curriculum learning standards. Are we communicating to our students what we expect them to know, what their goals are, and are we adhering our lessons to those goals? Is the connection clear? Secondly is the idea of assessment. How are we assessing our students? What are we assessing them on? And do they align with our goals from our instructional day-to-day formal or formative work? And then finally, the intervention. So, what are we doing with our assessment data in order to intervene and help our students grow? So my question for you is, what have you done to instruct on comprehension in the past? So what I'd like you to do right now is turn and talk and share with some of your peers how you have instructed comprehension in your own individual classrooms. All right, thank you for sharing some of the wonderful things that you have done. Hopefully that gets some ideas flowing in your head for things that you guys can take back to the classroom. What I would like to do now is give you some activities that I believe you can put into practice immediately after today's professional development. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was inferring. And one skill that the students absolutely are going to be tested on is this idea of inferring. So for those of you who aren't very familiar with the setup of the test, if we talk about the sophomores, for example, the planned test that they take, they're reading several different reading passages, after which they're being asked different levels of critical questions. And oftentimes we see that the students are required to make inferences. So I suggested a few activities for you here on the left, using things like silent films to show your student to introduce this idea of inferring, where we read between the lines about what's going on in the film, and then we draw conclusions from that. And also things as simple as highlighting different clues in the text that we use to draw our conclusions. Now you'll see the graphic on the right hand here under making inferences. This is just one handout that I am providing you in the packet that is a way to get your students thinking and inferring in your classroom. One of the best things about the activities that I'm going to give you today is they should be activities that you can use with multiple texts. So as you can see here, it asks for a few pieces of different information, background knowledge, and images reader creates. Photographs or illustrations from the text, and information from the text. And then all those draw down into this inference oval where the student is asked to draw some sort of conclusion. So hopefully that's something you can use in your classroom day to day. It can be a really quick activity, or it can be something that you extend to last longer throughout the entire length of a text. And then I've also provided you with an inference rubric. So I just did a little snapshot of the top 4 scores. So this is something I figured maybe you could use once your students have a little bit more practice outside of the Explore, the Plan, or the ACT. So on a more day-to-day basis, if you're working on inferring, here are some ways to assess your students. You'll see it's broken down from 6 all the way down to 1. If you look at the worksheet in your packet, you will see all the scores, though I'm only showing you a few. In the right-hand column, it will describe exactly what you would be looking for the students to do in order to reach that score. I like to share this with my students before we do an activity so they know exactly what is expected of them. The second classroom application, 2, is the sequencing chain. So when you provide students with a piece of text, are they able to look at the different characters, the setting, where the story is taking place, and then kind of map it out, as you can see here with the arrows, to let us know what happened? This is essentially a form of summarizing, asking the students to recall major events and major details. And what I have found in my classroom is that oftentimes when you put a time constraint on the students for the test, they tend to have this anxiety and this panic that they're not going to get through all the text. So one thing that I ask them to do is, can you remember the big ideas? Can you remember the big events? And so this chart really allows the students to plot those out in a visual way. And if you are doing something in the classroom that isn't timed, perhaps they can refer back to this as a review for a unit assessment, a summative assessment, so on and so forth. Third, we are actually going to be practicing in a few moments, which is vocabulary in context. Another type of question that they often ask on the EPAS tests has to do with vocabulary and asking the students if they can decipher the meaning of a word in the context of the whole text. So you'll see here, we are asking the students to do 4 different things. In the left-hand column, it says, quote, sentence with unknown word. So when a student recognizes a word that they don't know, or perhaps you can even do this with a practice test and write down a word. We would like you to write out them to write out the entire quote. The next column is your guess. So we ask the students to make a guess based on what they see in the text, any other words surrounding it, what they believe that word might mean. The next column is what helped you make that guess. So can they be metacognitive here and share what their thinking and their thought process was and provide the teacher or the instructor with the actual clues that they use to support their thinking? And then finally, the final revisions column. So we can either adjust if they were off with their definition, or we can simply just alter it a little bit to make it a little stronger. Oftentimes this is when I have my students look things up on their iPads or in their dictionary on their smartphone. So we will get to that in a minute and we will be practicing. Classroom application 4 is identifying the main idea. Oftentimes there are main idea or central meaning questions on the EPAS tests. So this is just one way to determine central meaning. As you can see, the directions say complete the following chart to determine the central or main idea of a text. So it asks you and it prompts you in each of these boxes to do different things, like what is the purpose of the text? How is the text structured? What are the 3 most important points being made during the text? And then what is the central idea? So if the students are to walk away with one idea from what they've just read, this kind of helps them narrow it down to the so what. What do I need to walk away with in order to remember and recall the important things from the text? This is a second way to be identifying the main idea. This is called the main idea wheel. And so what we have our students do is fill out the who, what, where, when, why, and how in the center of our wheel where it says main idea. We ask the students to put all these W answers to who, what, where, when, why, how into a sentence or 2 in the center. That is their main idea. Then if you'll notice on the outside, the 4 compartments say details, and at the bottom it says direct quotation. So then we ask the students to go back in their practices and find quotes that supports their thinking and their reasoning. So this is important for the students, A, to be able to support themselves, and B, to be able to go back and find specific areas of the text, which they oftentimes need to do and use as a skill when taking any of the EPAS tests. Classroom application 5 is summarizing. So you'll see I've 2 different activities or strategies here. One looks a little more fun than the other. The one on the left can be used for fiction or nonfiction, and the one on the right is specifically targeting nonfiction texts. And essentially, the gist of both of them is to provide a main idea, build with supporting details, and then finally be able to write a comprehensive summary of what they read. Again, this is kind of similar to the sequencing chain back in the beginning. Can our students really remember the important details and events and ideas in a text? So one important thing that we cannot forget about is how we diversify our teaching to reach all of our students. This tends to be one of the biggest frustrations for EPASS testing because we have no control as educators and as teachers over what the actual test looks like. However, I do think that on a day-to-day basis, formatively, a few of the things that you can be doing are diversifying passages for their topics, for your students' interests, their levels, and picking fiction versus nonfiction to expose them to all different types of things to prepare them. It's also important to know your students' accommodations and their IEPs and their 504 plans. Do they have extended time? Do they need things read to them verbally? And then finally, to advocate for your students who you believe need accommodations. So fight for the students that you recognize maybe need some of these things and aren't granted them at the time. That is your job as an educator to speak up and suggest these suggestions or make these accommodations for them. A few other things that I wanted to talk to you about are test-taking skills. There are so many different aspects that go into being a good test taker. First of all, you need to be able to monitor your time. You need to know, or it's helpful to know, the different types of questions, such as in the text, inferential, vocabulary, main idea, and author's purpose. So if the students are able to do that, they kind of have an idea of what they're being asked for. Next, the process of elimination. So can the students recognize the most correct answer versus the distractor? Can they automatically cross out any that they know 100% are incorrect in hopes of finding and narrowing it down to that correct answer? The idea of skimming and scanning. So if a student is looking for a piece of information, can they skim and scan through a text in order to find that more quickly? Test familiarization can also be helpful if you have the ability to administer old practice tests so that the students can be in a formal situation or a mock formal situation in which they will eventually take the real test. And then finally, creating this environment during these situations where there's no music, no food, and they need to remain in their seats like they will during the actual tests. So, we are going to be doing an activity now together. So if you could take out your packet, I'm looking at the Plan Form 27B reading passages. This is a copy or a practice test. You'll notice it has 3 different passages. It is a timed 20-minute test, and it has 25 questions attached to it. And so what I would like you to do in the next few minutes is I'm going to have you take just one of the passages. I'd like you to read it in the amount of time I provide for you and then answer the questions as if you were the student. I'll come back to you in a minute. You have 5 minutes. Your time begins now. Okay, now that you've taken the time to do that, what I would like to do is go through and I would like to tell you and show you which answers are wrong. Okay, and this is one of the most important parts for students is that they're able to recognize, okay, I got something wrong. Now what do I do to move on past that and figure out what I did wrong so that I don't make that mistake again? So if you look up on the projector that I provided for you, okay, I am giving you the correct answers really quickly. So if you could go through and check yours, okay. Now I'm actually going to take this screen away, and what I would like you to do is I'd like you to go back in now, and I'd like you to look at the questions that maybe you got wrong, and if you didn't get any wrong, I brought a student sample so that you can pretend to be that student, and I'd like you to go back, look at the question, and then find the correct answer. And then what I'd like you to do is figure out what types of questions was this student or were you missing most frequently. Do you struggle with in the text questions? Do you struggle with main idea questions, inferring questions, vocabulary questions, or author's purpose? Oftentimes this is helpful to identify patterns that our students have with the mistakes that they make, and if we are able to identify those patterns and bring some awareness to them, we hope that students in the future can apply the different strategies that they're learning in class to those specific types of questions in hopes of getting them correct. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to go through, analyze your results, find the correct answer, and then again I'd like you to justify why it's the correct answer and what type of question this is and see if you can pick up on any patterns. All right, great job going through those. The last thing that I would like to do is I'd like you to pull out that vocabulary sheet that I gave you back in the different applications in the classroom, this one. And I've provided you, again on the projector, a few different words from the passage that you just read. And so I've given you 2 examples. What I would like you to do is go through this worksheet. First, copy down the sentence with the unknown word in it. And then I'd like you to provide your guess. In the next column, what helped you make that guess? What context clues did you use? And then any final revisions we will do together in a moment. So take a look at the 2 words on the board. If you could complete those first 3 columns on the worksheet, we will meet back together in a moment. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing all of your answers. I've also now provided you the final revisions on the projector, so if you can look away from the screen to that for a moment and copy those down onto your worksheet. How many of you felt like you were on the right path? Great. How many of you might have been a little bit off? Okay, great. So it's easy to understand that maybe our students could be in the same shoes as us right now when they take these tests. So if we fast forward here, okay, this is this analysis that we just did, and practicing these vocabulary words are things that I do throughout the school year, and I try to expose my students to these skills, these types of questions as often as I can. So I change this up for every little practice test that I give them. The students have learned to get into a good schedule about how to complete these, and so now it just has become part of our classroom routine. So the last thing that I'd like to talk about is what is the plan moving forward? So the question now is, how do we ensure that our students hit their target? So I'm going to be providing you with the last few minutes of our time together to kind of come up with and talk to maybe some of your colleagues about the plan that you would like to create moving forward. How could you be using some of these strategies and applications in your classroom to better your students? And can you be collaborating with any of your peers based on things that you already have in your repertoire to build this idea and these skills? So if you could just turn and talk with some of your peers or work on this individually. If you would like to come up and show me your plan, that would be great, just to hear some of your ideas. I think I've learned so many great things from you guys, and hopefully you'll be able to take these skills back, maybe teach some of your colleagues, and then reap the benefits eventually in your classroom, and then finally on the EPASS test scores. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great working with you.